Okay, so it says connecting. Oh, that's you. Can you see me?
I can't see you. No, not yet.
Okay, I can see you.
Okay.
Not quite sure how to make me see you see me.
That's okay. I mean, you are on the meeting as an attendee, it appears. Is that correct, Stephen? Okay. So you can go ahead and start the meeting, Lynn, if you'd like. So just so
I can turn you off my phone, correct?
Stephen?
I do. What is the name? I do not see Lynn on the.
Lynn, what would your?
Robin Torpey, Mary Beth McGrath.
Did you see Carolyn Valancourt?
I see somebody named Fire.
Yeah.
I can see Crystal. I just see you. And I don't know if you're hearing me from my phone or hearing me from my recording device.
They're hearing you from your phone.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep you on phone until that piece of it, and phone is just as good as the web connection.
Okay.
So just so,
one second, let me see if my son can help.
Okay.
Well, I'm on a Zoom meeting. Can you make me be able to be seen and be heard from that? My son's attempting to help me with my stuff here.
Okay. Well, everyone can hear you on the telephone if you want to go ahead and start.
Okay.
So just so that you are aware, Mary Russo is not able to join us this evening because one of her family members is involved in a medical situation that she's attending to.
Okay. So today's date is July 6, 2020. It is 6:40, and we're going to open up the meeting for the Commission on Disabilities. And if we can go ahead and take a roll call. Lynn Valancourt present.
Crystal Evans present.
Robin?
Robin Torpey present.
Okay. So this is the meeting of the Commission on Disabilities for Monday, July 6, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. It is being brought via Zoom as the town hall is closed to the public. Go ahead, Lynn.
For opening of the meeting, if we could have do we have a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting from the last meeting?
Yes, I like a motion.
Okay. And do we have
I seconded.
So as you may all recall, when we're doing a Zoom meeting, besides the motions, I also need a roll call for approval of it. So Lynn, as a roll call.
Yeah, I have an aye from Lynn.
And Crystal?
Yes.
And Robin?
I seconded.
Okay, yes. Okay. And the next item that's on the agenda are updates. Christina can start us off with the updates that she has available.
Hi, everybody. So the AARP grant status, I emailed them last week, just checking in, maybe getting my name to the top of the list. They said that they're still reviewing applications and that they should have a decision, they said, on or around July 6th. So I've been checking my email all day. I haven't heard anything. I'm not going to read into that. I'm just hoping that they're still reviewing. So, you know, hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have a big fat yes. So fingers crossed. Ms. Evans had expressed, you know, thought into looking into fencing around the Sunset Lake Park area. So I worked with engineering and got a picture and specs of the layout of the park. And I emailed all that information to two fence companies. Haven't heard back from them either, so I'll follow up with them this week. I sent it last week. I think it was Fair Fencing and then Armstrong Fencing. So I will reach out to them. The shared streets and Spaces grant program. I've been working with Lorraine C., our grants writer, and Jim Arsenault, our DPW director. And we had submitted to them work and the proposal of redoing the sidewalk leading from, is that Union Street, all the way down to the T. Come to find out that that is not an option. Miss C was on a webinar after everything was submitted, and sidewalk work is not something that they're going to allow, and that affected a lot of towns, not just us. So we are back to the drawing board and have some other really great ideas to talk with Lorraine about. She comes back tomorrow. She took a couple days off. So we're going to kind of hammer that out and hopefully resubmit something. The deadline, there wasn't, at first it didn't seem like there was a deadline for the grant submittal, but I believe she said it was the end of September. So we're going to move on that. Like I said, she should be back tomorrow. And the sensory bags, Rob told me that from BEMA, told me that he has all of the items needed. He was waiting on a couple of other parts to come in, just due to everything that's going on. And I think we're going to put them together, or we did put some of them together before everything happened. And I spoke with Lynn about maybe not putting in the wobble chair and, or sorry, the wobble cushion, or the, I forget what the other piece was, but that they are too expensive, and with everything going on, we can't just kind of give them away. Those items would have to be reusable. So we might put those items off to the side. And then once they're done, Rob and I were just going to coordinate getting them out to different departments, fire, emergency management, police. So hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. And that's it from me.
So just to jump on Christina's notes, Rob Millette with BEMA has been really wonderful in coordinating and purchasing all of the supplies for the sensory bags. There was a bit of a tie-up and delay during the COVID response throughout the nation because things were in short supply, and I know that Amazon and places like that were trying to process orders as quickly as they could, but Rob's been really great putting those things together and continues to do that with us. As Christina had mentioned and Lynn had mentioned, there are some things that were of concern to put in the bags that may, we want to make sure that they're being used appropriately and that they're available when needed. So we will be connecting with Rob and going through all of that with him to make sure that the appropriate equipment is in the bags and that they're given to the right agencies to make sure that they'll be used appropriately. Also, I did want to connect with you on the finances. So at present, in the handicap parking fine account, we have $47,160. So I've received all the bills from Rob for the sensory bag, so that piece is taken care of. And I know that you spoke about at the last meeting considering a fencing location around Sunset Lake, which Christina's trying to get quotes on that in coordination with the DPW department. But so there are other opportunities for the commission to consider with the funding to recommend to the mayor's office for an expenditure, something to think about.
Okay. Is that all the stuff that's officially on the agenda? Because I had a couple of things around that to bring up.
Yes.
Okay. My first question is, in relation to COVID, as restaurants are reopening, what are we doing to make sure that we have accessible temporary restaurant seating and access to the outdoor restaurants?
Mm-hmm. So my inspectional staff on the building side has been coordinating and inspecting all of the restaurant locations that have approved outdoor seating to make sure that they have accessible locations. And if not, they're going back to make sure that once they've done that, they follow up to make sure they are compliant, as well as on the inside of the establishments. Okay,
what about outdoor tables? Are the tables ADA compliant that they're using as temporary seating?
From those that have approved seating, that not every restaurant has applied for outdoor seating.
Okay.
So those that have been given approved seating, we've gone out and we've checked. Those that don't have compliant tables, which we haven't found any at this point, they have been advised of what the requirement is.
The requirement would be the same as any other table with, I believe it's 19 inches of clearance under the table set to the right height for accessibility to be able to roll a wheelchair up to.
Mhm. So what we've advised them is the tables that they're providing, if they don't have an accessible table, they need to provide one.
One or proper ratios for how many tables they have.
Well, I mean, they're gonna have to provide accessible tables. If it's one or more than one, then they're gonna have to provide them.
Okay, just say some restaurants have a lot of tables, but yeah, okay. On the topic of tables, picnic tables as well in the town, I'm wondering if we can get a review of where the picnic tables at our public spaces are being positioned, because I'm seeing in multiple parks that the picnic tables that are there are not on accessible surfaces, or they are pushed so far out of the way that it's a very remote location. For instance, Sunset Lake has a accessible table behind where the garages are for BEMA. It's off in the corner between there and the fence, past gravel, that you'd have to be able to get your wheelchair to get to the accessible picnic table. It's not in a main area of the park, so why are they putting the accessible table that far out? I've seen this happening at other parks as well, where there's an accessible table, but there's an inaccessible route to get to the accessible table.
We'll have to connect with the DPW. Although Sunset Lake is opened, it's not being, the waterfront program has not opened.
Right.
So we'll have to connect with DPW and find out if they've just placed that there as a location for storage or what they're doing with it.
Well, I've seen this and I've seen this over the years. This isn't the first I've noticed that the accessible picnic tables are not in a spot that people can actually access. I've seen this at multiple playgrounds, or the ones that are non-accessible are located in accessible locations, and it's literally a switch of tables.
So I think one of the big things that we have to consider is that we would first have to contact DPW. They may have been following simply a directive to lessen the number of tables that are available due to the COVID response, and the people who moved the tables may not have been aware of any type of requirement. So the first thing we need to do is just contact DPW, remind them of the requirements, and make sure that they have in the tables they have designated as usable tables the correct number and placement of their handicapped.
Okay, but this is still, it's a problem annually, not just in COVID. Like, for instance, last year they put accessible tables at Sunset Lake in the sand, but they put the non-accessible tables on firm surfaces. So this, like, some of my friends went and moved tables around themselves rather than having to wait on stuff. They just went and rearranged tables at Sunset Lake last summer and put all the accessible ones in accessible locations.
Well, at this point, I think what we have to concentrate on is making sure that we are safe for this summer and making sure that those issues are raised so that they are somehow put into practice for the subsequent summers. But I think this year is a little bit different enough that we really have to concentrate on making sure that we are accessible and making sure that we are compliant with phase 3 as it stands right now.
Okay.
So Christina is part of a weekly DPW staff meeting, so she can mention that tomorrow at the weekly staff meeting, and I will follow it up as well with Jim Arsenault, the DPW director.
Okay. My next question is regarding the construction in South Braintree.
I was trying to say something.
Oh, can I just say something about the issue with the outside seating? What's going on with Southside Tavern? There is, number one, no room for handicap accessibility. Number two, if they were any closer, no masks, and they're like on top of each other, we're going to have a baby boom in 9 months. And it's twice I've gone by there. The place is packed. I've never seen so many people put into a spot like that.
Well, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of tables. We have made sure that so the requirement for the tables is that the tables be 6 foot apart.
They're not. They're not.
Well, we'll go back and do a follow-up, because when we were there last week, they were.
I went by there yesterday, and if they're 6 feet apart, I'm going to have to get binocular glasses. because
Okay,
there's no
so-
way.
So we'll go back tomorrow and do a follow-up, because they were when we were there last.
They're also directing everybody to go up the steps from the municipal lot and into that area. They've chained off the rest of the parking lot, so there's no accessible point to access the,
Well, they were specifically spoken with about that, to make sure that they provide access, an accessible route. Because Russ Forsberg
way.
went himself to provide that, to discuss it with them. So we'll have him go back and do a follow-up.
okay, yeah, because they
Thank
have to spend with their doorman at the top of the stairs to like ID everybody as they come in over there still, as of earlier.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, my other questions were around South Braintree Square's construction. The streets were finished last year. However, the transition curb to the curb cuts are still patches, and the patches of asphalt that were placed there to transition, number one, are not compliant. Some wheelchair users can't get over that lip. And as the summer heat has occurred, the asphalt patches are sinking, making a bigger gap than previously was there. My wheelchair is having a trouble. It's right in South Braintree Square, in front of Braintree Rug is a problem, in front of Walgreens is still a problem. A couple of the cross streets, side streets, there's still gaps. So wheelchair users can't get up those curb cuts. And then down at Hancock, is it Hancock Ave and Hancock Street, or is it Hancock Place? Further down by Ricciardi's, those curb cuts are still incomplete as well. In that bump, the gap is too hard for certain types of wheelchairs to get up and over. If everything else is completed, why are the curb cuts still left a year later?
I know that last we spoke to Jim about the project, South Braintree Square, is that they are reliant upon that contractor to get back there. So let's connect with DPW and we'll find out what's going on. And we can send an email to the members.
I'm also wondering about the audible signals in the square. When construction occurs, that should trigger audible signal upgrades for people that are blind. And that has not occurred yet. And I'm wondering when those signals will be replaced, given that the construction should trigger the ADA compliance there.
Again, we'll have to connect with DPW. I don't know what the requirements are around that, depending upon what the cost was of the project. So we'll connect with them on that.
Also, I'm wondering if the Disability Commission could get a copy of Beld's policies for their crosswalk button repairs, audible signal repairs, and upgrades, and then have Beld come review it with us at our next meeting to see that their policies are in compliance with the ADA.
I can look into that for you. I mean, it's up to them if that's up to Mr. Batigi what he would consider. So I will certainly invite him to the meeting.
Okay, yeah, because I was told previously by a Beld employee that they don't, like when audible signals break, they didn't want to fix them because people complained about the noise, but the signal is there for access. So it's tough that there's noise, but there's very few of those in town to begin with. And we still need to be in compliance regardless of noise that audible signals create.
Okay, so you wanted the audible signals and what else, Crystal?
I want to know their Beld's policies for crosswalk button repairs, because it often takes 3 to 6 months to get a button repaired from the time you report it. Audible signal repairs when they break and they stop making noise. For instance, there was some broken over by the town hall for 13 months in 2018 into 2019. And then the upgrades when there's construction, what triggers the upgrades for them to make the crosswalk buttons audible for ADA compliance under the latest ADA guidelines?
Out of curiosity, if I can interject for a second, when the audible signal that was, if it's on a state road or it was not put in by the town of Braintree, but it was put in by the state, is it Braintree that has to fix that, or is it the state that has to fix that?
The state has upgraded multiple intersections to audible. They did 5 Corners not too long ago. They've done a couple of others, and I'm not referring to state intersections. I'm particularly curious about, like, for instance, they just redid Hancock Street. So why are those signals right there not into compliance? There's other intersections that have been done and roads that have been resurfaced. For instance, Ivory at Union has been resurfaced recently, a couple years ago. Why were those not triggered for construction, for compliance? And those ones have broken for extended periods of time at Ivory and Union. That's extremely dangerous in that intersection to not have a working crosswalk button. and it's next to the T.
And I don't doubt that it is not safe in order to not have audibles. I think that the issue is that we have to make sure that we understand the reason for it not working or the reason of it not getting there. And so first we have to talk with DPW and find out, or talk with BELD and find out what they have jurisdiction over. Are there any certain ones that did not, that are not on their list because it's on someone else's list? And then also find out whether or not there is a regular maintenance schedule for those buttons, and how they actually prioritize whether or not the buttons are getting done. So I think that there's some steps to go through to make sure that we're targeting the right people to get the answer, to make sure that we're notifying the right people, so we don't have to keep notifying people again and again.
Right, so what we'll do is we will reach out not only to Jim Arsenal, but also Bill Batigi at the same time, so that we have everyone connected, and try and see if we can get some answers to the questions that Crystal has posed for us.
Okay. Another construction that stems from the South Braintree Square. The trees in the sidewalks down Hancock Street, there's also some on Pearl Street. The holes there, they made us exactly 36 inches to get around them. However, in the winter, when the plow plows, if they don't clear that 36 inches and they're going over the holes, we don't have compliance. My wheelchair fell in one of those holes last year because it was buried under snow. I didn't know I was over a hole. I followed the plow path and I fell into a tree hole. What I'm wondering is, should we look at using some of the commission funds to get those grates that can go around the trees that widen the sidewalk, so that way there's a firm surface no matter what, and those are used throughout Boston. I see them in Quincy, Cambridge, Somerville, and the benefit to those is not only that it widens the sidewalk, but it helps keep the tree roots pushed down into the ground. So as the tree grows, it doesn't damage the sidewalk. It helps the roots go deeper.
Is it a porous material?
They're metal. The metal is great. They're standard roots in my house.
Water to flow through, or is it a solid metal area?
It's a ADA compliant, where the gaps are, the design of them is such that the gaps for like water drainage are small enough where somebody walking with a cane over it won't get their cane stuck in it, for instance. So it's solid enough with drainage. Does that make sense? There's all different designs.
My question would be, if it's a fairly newer item, is it an item that's meant to retrograde back to the type of grading that is surrounding a tree from the time period that construction was done? Or is it designed for things for new construction? Because there may be a difference there.
There's different types. There's also root systems that could be installed with trees. However, they put the tree, some of these trees are brand new. They're baby trees that you can easily put these in now, so that way it helps it immediately. There's a couple trees that have been in existence, but a few of the trees in that area got knocked down last year during a storm. Through the South Braintree Square area. But yeah, there's all different types. There's root systems that can be installed when you plant a tree. That I think is something else that we could look at in the future. But right now, where this is new construction, I'm like, could we do something to widen the sidewalks where it's at currently before these trees get too big?
So we can certainly look into that. I'll connect with Jim Arsenal and engineering with the town. I don't know if any change to the current construction may void any types of warranties or whatnot. I'd have to check with DPW on that.
Okay. And then around construction itself, I'm wondering if we can have on the agenda at the next meeting to discuss construction zone access and best practices around when we have construction. A lot of the companies that do the Braintree's road construction are working in other cities like Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Quincy, and when I'm encountering their construction zones in those cities, there's full ADA compliance. But when they're working in Braintree, the ADA compliance is not part of the construction contract, so they're not providing here what they're providing to other communities because they're not being asked to. So I wonder if we could talk through contracting with maybe DPW, Jim Arsenault, if he can come to the meeting, and that could cover some of these other questions I have. In what constitutes an accessible construction zone. It's also mandated under the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board to have temporary path of travel during construction.
And is this in regard to areas that have to do with the MBTA, or is this regard to areas that have to do?
Whether it's private building doing construction interfering with sidewalk access, whether it's construction on the roads, you still need alternative sidewalk access. If a sidewalk is closed, you need a alternative path that stops you at the last access point to direct pedestrians across the street so they're not walking in circles, trying to get to the closest curb cut to be able to get out of a construction zone and cross when necessary. I have tons of photos of really good construction zones I could pull together for next month as well. I take them when I find them because there's some really brilliant temporary access point designs that I've encountered in Boston.
So we will reach out to Jim Arsenault on several of the things that you've mentioned, Crystal, and get some follow-up action for the.
Okay. And this is always on the construction company itself. This isn't something so much that Braintree would have to provide. They would just have to oversee that it's there. So the expense is all part of the construction itself, not a town expense. And these companies have alternative methods. They have the barriers that they can give us pedestrian path of travel. They have temporary curb cuts that they could be putting down.
Hang on, Lynn, hang on. Crystal's still talking.
Years ahead of time.
Lynn.
And then it depends on where the construction is, who actually is responsible for the contract. Is the construction company a subcontractor, or is the construction company the primary contractor? So it all depends on a lot of items, so we would have to clarify those items and make sure that we have a process in place that is way ahead of when the actual construction is occurring.
This is all stuff that should be part of the contract before construction even starts, though.
That's what I'm saying, is that when you are doing this, you can't assume that it is the construction company that has determined the items of the contract. Sometimes the construction company doing the work is a subcontractor to another company who has been subcontracted out from another company. And you don't know where in the chain of contracts the thing fell through. So we need to make sure that we are in the loop and finding out at the time when things are in planning, which is usually a couple of years ahead of the construction. And I only know this because my husband works for a large engineering firm, and they work with a lot of the contracts that have to do with accessibility and the MBTA, and accessibility with a lot of the other public transportations and transportations within towns. So just because this particular construction company has not followed it, it may not be that construction company's problem. It may have been a problem 3 steps prior in the chain of contracts.
Okay, but I've lived in Braintree 8 years, and the only accessible construction zone I've ever encountered was at the MBTA. Meanwhile, I go through Boston all the time, and I can easily hit a dozen construction zones just in one trip through Boston because there's a lot of development going on in some of the areas I frequent. And there's only been one construction zone in Boston in the past few years that I encountered that was not accessible. I mean, which is a huge difference here.
So what we're going to do is, as I mentioned, we'll reach out to Jim, talk with him, get some answers to the questions, and see if he would be willing to come to the meeting next month to discuss what the protocol is around construction and contracting and ADA components involved in that.
Okay. Another question I have is, when things are being planned for major redesigns such as roadways, South Braintree Squares construction, for instance, the schools, parks, anything like that, why is it not coming through the Disability Commission? We used to see plans. For instance, we were seeing the Peterson Pool plans. We've seen playgrounds before everything went in. And lately, we haven't seen any of this in the past few years. How can we have input in the planning process before things are actually finalized and started?
Well, what particular projects are you talking about?
For instance, we never saw East Middle School before they rebuilt it. We never saw any of the redesign of South Braintree Square. The parks, there was the new park redone over in the East Braintree area. Which one was it? Perry Park? and none of those plans were ever brought to the commission, but we've previously seen plans. For instance, when they redid Hollingsworth, we saw that before it was finalized. The stuff around the town hall construction was brought to us, but that's the last I've seen of anything in several years.
Okay, well, we'll see what the protocol will be forward through the mayor and our chief of staff going forward.
Okay. I'm also wondering if we can have a discussion with the Braintree Police in the next meeting or in the near future to discuss training and policies around diversity and disability. I know this has come up in the past, but there's been a lot more media coverage of certain aspects of things. There was a study that was released in 2016 by the Rudderman Family Foundation, and it showed that disabled individuals make up a third to half of all people killed by law enforcement officers. Disabled individuals make up the majority of those killed in use of force cases that attract widespread attention. Additionally, students of color and students with disabilities are often disproportionately affected by school resource officers and in-school suspensions. I know yesterday New Hampshire just released a report from their data from the Department of Civil Rights, which stated students of color were twice as likely to be suspended as white students, and students of color who were also disabled were 5.5 times as likely to be suspended than non-disabled white students. There's a big intersectionality here around race and disability especially, and I'm wondering how we can address these issues in our community. I know it's part of a national talk right now, but I think it's important to discuss how are we handling things such as mental health issues, people with PTSD, for instance, veterans. If there's a psychiatric call, what systems are in place to support the individual rather than to react in a way where the disability is not understood. Mental health is common, autism is common, misunderstandings where a deaf person has been harmed by the police because they're not responding to commands is a big issue. And I'm just wondering if we can look at our protocols within the town and what training officers have around disability issues.
So I do know that the town council, that is something that they have been discussing, and it's something that they will be taking up in the future. So I believe from a town perspective, that may be where it's going to start. But I will connect with the mayor and our chief of staff and also mention to them that you had mentioned this at tonight's meeting and see if that should be redirected into what the town council is looking at as well.
Could it be something where the Disability Commission works jointly with the council, maybe also the school department, because some of this plays back into students with disabilities and there are needs in the school where autism, for instance, may not be understood, or a child having a meltdown. This has happened all over the country where, they've ended up tasered at school, they've ended up in handcuffs, and it's like the child is having a meltdown and that's not what they need in that moment. And that's why I'm wondering if we can hold this discussion to talk through some of these issues on how we can work to improve access to services, including what law enforcement and their reactions are in our own community.
Well, I certainly can't speak for the town council. This is something, as I mentioned, I'll bring forward to the mayor and the chief of staff, who are my bosses, and then that can be forwarded over to the town council as a larger discussion on the town's behalf. So I don't know that we want to start getting fragmented different groups if this is something that's going to be discussed on a larger scale. So I need to run that through our chief of staff and the mayor.
Okay.
I also want to remind everybody that, and I think we all, of course, know that when the COVID response occurring
I think.
There are a lot of issues that are on a very short time frame that need to be addressed immediately, and we probably need to have some understanding that there may be things that that the town needs to address by a statewide mandate that they need to handle that might have more precedence than this, although this is a very important topic. There may be items that they are mandated to complete by a particular deadline. So to be able to mention it to someone and say that we'd like to have a meeting we have to have the understanding that that meeting may not occur within a month or 2 months because we have return to school, we have hospital responses, we have responses for the emergency personnel, we have public health responses that have to do with the COVID response, and the police department now has to be shoring up and figuring out what to do as far as gun safety, since we also have found out just in tonight's reports that gun violence has increased over the state, in Boston, and on the South Shore precipitously. So these are some items that I know that they will be responding to, and that we have to be understanding that our request may not be the request that occurs and we get an answer within 48 hours.
Well, I can assure you, as I'd mentioned in the previous things that were mentioned, I will be bringing this forward to the specific departments as well as the mayor's office and our chief of staff to get answers back to the commission and see what, on this particular subject, as I've mentioned, it is something that's going to be discussed on a larger scale, I understand, through the town council. So that's something that has to be coordinated to include them in the mayor's office. So I cannot unilaterally bring something forward to the Commission on Disabilities when that would be discussed on a larger scale at a town level.
That's understood. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Hi, Mary Beth, can you hear me?
Lynn, I believe Robin wants to speak. Hang on a minute. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, just a quick question. I know it's not totally a Commission on Disability item, but it's more of the health item, is about people wearing masks. I went out yesterday, and out of 100 people, maybe 10 had masks on. And I don't understand. I thought, it was like kind of like mandated for their own safety.
Well,
I don't know if this.
So the requirement for face coverings is inside an establishment, persons have to wear face coverings unless there would be some sort of condition or disability, medical condition or disability that would preclude them from wearing that safely. Outside, if you cannot, you have to wear a face covering unless you can maintain the 6-foot separation between other persons.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome.
I just thought you just wear it all the time. That's all.
No. If you're outside, as long as you can maintain a 6-foot separation between another person, then you wouldn't need a face mask. Of course, the other thing would be if you're dining and you're eating, you can't wear a face mask.
Right. Yeah. All right, then. It's a good way to be on a diet, though, huh? All right. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome.
And Robin, I wanted to let you know that I have had to do a lot of treatments and things within the apartment complexes and within public spaces all around the town. And there are signed mandates that in most of the large apartment complexes, on the doors of all the apartments that notify people of this, it's signed by the mayor. And on all the public buildings that have to do with town government, there are signed compliance notices that are up. So people should be aware that those are the requirements.
Robin, do you have any other questions? Robin?
Yes?
Oh, do you have any other questions?
Oh, no. And I just want to thank our police force and the state troopers and everything that took care of the situation at the South Shore Plaza respectfully in the proper way. My friend's daughter was there with her granddaughter a half hour before it happened, and my niece and great niece were there. We're just pulling in, and they just pulled right out. But thank God everything got taken care of safely and no big thing. But it's a shame. It's sad that it has to be. But I just thank them for taking care of it properly and not getting anybody else hurt. And thankfully that young lady will be okay. And that's all I have to say on my soapbox.
Thanks, Robin. And so that's all we have on the agenda, Lynn.
Yeah, I can see the agenda right here. Are there any other new issues that anybody needed to bring up besides those that have been mentioned?
One last question. We still don't have closed captioning on the Zoom meeting?
I know that that's being worked on. Andrew Marin is working with Stephen on making that feature in the future. I don't know what the time frame is. Stephen, do you have any indication on time frame? Stephen? Okay, I'm gonna have to find out because I know that they were working on that and there was a certain time frame within our schedule that would be compliant.
Okay. If there are no other issues, do I have a movement to adjourn the meeting at 7:18 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second it. Robin Torpey seconded.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert Torpey, and thank you, Chris.
Good, okay.
So can we adjourn the meeting at 7:19 p.m.
Wait. Should we
Yeah,
get
I
public
just need a
comment?
roll call.
Oh, roll call again.
So Lynn Valancourt,
Lynn Valancourt, yes?
Crystal Evans,
Just a second. Should we ask for public comment? We have 5 attendees.
Oh, I didn't realize, sorry about that. We can ask the public comments.
is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? And there's a caller named Joanne that would like to make a comment. Joanne? Hello?
Hi. I was trying to raise my hand during the discussion and it's really kind of pointless now, so no, I guess I won't.
Well, I would like to hear what you were thinking.
Well, with regard to the police and other, well, the law enforcement officials in the city, in the town, being trained or having, this is what I know it's going to be coming down from the state, but I would be extremely interested in the Disabilities Commission being a part of, I think it's crucial for the Disabilities Commission to be a part of any discussion. People, I know this from working with the T as far as accessibility is concerned, people assume that they know all about what access is about, and they don't. It takes a number of people. It takes people like Lynn and other people who can see beyond their own disabilities even to get people to recognize that, you know, in the heat of a moment, it's not just a deaf person who might not communicate with in a timely fashion with an officer, but somebody who has who's unable to speak. People who are blind might not realize that they're being talked to. There are all kinds of reasons why communication might be missed, and one of the most important things as far as these incidents with police have to do with communication and how speedily they're answered or whatever. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yep.
Joanne?
Stephanie, do we have
Hi, Joanne. I agree with you. I think it's a good idea because I know my husband was deaf, and anytime there was a situation, people would just think he was ignoring them, and it was bad. And I agree wholeheartedly. That's just another compassion training that everybody should have. It should be common sense.
But it's
Like
not.
somebody in-
Sense isn't common anymore.
Huh?
So common sense isn't common anymore.
Oh, I know. That I know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lynn, I don't see anyone else raising their hand to speak.
Okay. In that case, shall we take a roll call for adjournment of the meeting?
So it's now 7:23, And Crystal made a motion previously to adjourn, and Robin Torpy seconded it. So roll call, Lynn, you had indicated yes. Crystal, you had indicated yes.
Yes.
And Robin Torpy?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice month. Have a
You
nice
too.
month, everybody.
You
Safe.
too, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, good night.
Night.